Welcome to the Two Guys at a Cooler channel, folks. My name is Eric, and we've got one heck of an episode lined up for you today. I'm glad you could make it. Today, we're going to be rounding down our series on how we fix the refrigerant leak inside of our Harvest Right freeze dryer. I do want to say, in the interest of full disclosure, that I am an affiliate for Harvest Right, and if you happen to click the link in the description box below and purchase a freeze dryer through that link, I do get a very small commission. It costs you absolutely nothing, and it does help the channel. I also want to say that after I published part 1 of this series, the Vice President of Customer Support for Harvest Right reached out to me, and to say the least, he was incredibly disappointed. He told me that my situation should have never went down the way that it did, and that they are actively working on improving the customer service experience. All right, let's get into it. At the end of the last episode, we tried to take the easy route when it came to fixing our refrigerant leak, and we used a leak stop by a company called New Calgon. Let me show you the results.
Let's take a peek inside the freeze dryer. We just ran a full freeze cycle, and I made a mark inside the drum where the frost pattern originally stopped before we added the leak stop. It's right about here. I'll get closer in a minute. And as you can see, only about 50% of our drum is getting frosty, so that frost pattern is receding, which tells me that we're continuing to lose refrigerant. Now, interestingly enough, I was told that the leak stop by New Calgon did have a fairly decent track record out in the field, but there was one particular circumstance in which it rarely ever works, and as luck would have it, that happened to be the circumstance that we were dealing with.
All right, so plan A was a bust. Time for plan B. And let me just say at this point that I am intimately familiar with how this freeze dryer operates. And so at any point through this video, if you have a question about what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, or if you're experiencing a particular issue and you'd like to maybe troubleshoot it, drop me a comment in the comment section below. We'll see if we can figure it out together. Let's get into it.
So the next thing we need to do is take our unit completely apart to find out exactly where this refrigerant leak is coming from. So the disassembly of this particular unit is pretty easy. We removed the modular computer, the sensor, and all the cables. We also need to disconnect the line that goes to the compressor, so I'm going to cut it right about here. And then we're going to disconnect the filter from the system, which will completely separate the drum from the condensing system. We also want to unscrew the drain hose, so that way that's not in the way. There are 4 screws on the front that connect the drum to the front plate. You definitely want to unscrew those. There's also a bunch of screws under that front plate that I had previously disconnected. And then finally, we're going to disconnect the 4 mounting screws, and the drum can just easily be separated. We need to now expose the coil. So I'm just going to use a box cutter. I didn't know of a better way to do it. And score the foam from top to bottom. Using a crowbar very carefully, I'm just going to basically pop off that foam, and it came off relatively easy. This is what our drum looks like. Okay, let's take this up a notch, because what I want to do is see if we can actually find the leak. So I do want to seal up any of the exposed areas from that copper tubing. We already have a Schrader valve, so we're going to charge just this little tube up right quick, remove it from the drum, and dunk it in some water. I think that's probably going to give us a better indication of exactly what's going on. So let's just see what's happening. I think we should be able to see something pretty clearly. Little bit of bubbles right there on the back side. Let's get in a little closer so that we can get a better look. And it looks like we found our leak. All right, so it's not impossible for a leak to come from within the drum. We've got one right there. This is the reason our freeze dryer wouldn't freeze properly. And now we can move on. Now, I do want to tell you that I did find a couple other leaks on the coil, and this particular issue is 100% covered under warranty. We'll talk about that here in a second. And this falls under the defective workmanship or material category of the warranty. Let me read it.
This particular issue is covered for 3 years, both in the continental United States and in Alaska, Hawaii, Canada, and Puerto Rico. And I'm just going to read the warranty as it reads on their website. There are a couple differences depending on where you live. If you live in the continental United States, the warranty reads as follows. Harvest Right will be responsible for repair or, at our option, replace any part of the sealed refrigeration system, compressor, condenser, evaporator, or tubing which fails because of defective workmanship or material. And the leak that we're dealing with in this video 100% falls under defective material. And so according to the warranty, if you live in the United States, you can either send your unit back to Harvest Right, where they will repair or replace the evaporator system and then send it back to you, or they will send you the evaporator part, and then you've got to have a local qualified repair person do the job. Now, if you live in Alaska, Hawaii, Canada, and Puerto Rico, the warranty changes a little bit. It reads all provisions of this limited warranty are the same as listed above. And so what's covered doesn't change. You still get 3 years on the refrigeration system. Here's what changes. The service will be provided by the customer or a qualified local service provider. And so if you live in Alaska, Hawaii, Canada, and Puerto Rico, according to the warranty, Harvest-Right will ship you the part that needs to be replaced, and you must have a local qualified service provider install it onto your machine. So there you go. Those are kind of the two big changes between whether you live in the United States or whether you live in Alaska, Hawaii, Canada, and Puerto Rico. Now, if you live outside of that area, and it doesn't matter where you live, Latin America, Europe, Africa, it doesn't really matter, this is what applies to you. As far as the warranty period, you only get 1 year from original ship date, so you don't get that extended 3-year warranty. You only get 12 months. And it says here that Harvest-Right will only provide support through telephone and email, and at their option, all parts necessary will be provided by Harvest-Right. You will be responsible for cost of local service and cost of transportation and delivery for all parts. So there you have it. If you live outside of the areas mentioned, you only have 1 year warranty and you have to pay somebody who is qualified to do the work, but Harvest-Right will send you the part and you have to pay for the shipping cost to get it to you. And just to confirm that all this information that I'm giving you is accurate, I contacted Harvest-Right about 30 minutes ago and spoke to a very nice individual out in the Philippines. And I told her everything that I just now told you, and she confirmed that my interpretation of the warranty was 100% accurate. So that's directly from Harvest-Right. Now here's what I want to know, and this is where I think the communication broke down in episode 1 of this series, and it's the reason why the Vice President of Customer Support reached out to me expressing his concern and his desire to want to make this situation right. Matter of fact, he told me that they were diligently working on improving the customer service experience, especially when it came to issues like this. If you're dealing with a situation similar to this, let me know in the comment section below. Is it getting resolved quickly? Are you at a place where nothing is happening, months and months have gone by, and you're getting absolutely nowhere? I'd love to hear about it in the comment section below, because I'd love to see how Harvest-Right is doing with their promise to improve the customer service experience. All right, now that's the warranty, and it's now time to fix our freeze jar. And let me just start off with a little disclaimer. What we're about to do to our freeze jar, you will never, ever have to do to your freeze jar. Matter of fact, in order to fix your freeze jar is pretty simple. Let me show you what the replacement part looks like and what you need to do to put it onto the freeze jar, or at least what a qualified repair person would do. Hang on one second. There you have it. This is called the vacuum chamber assembly. You might recognize it because this is where your food goes during the freeze drying cycle. This particular piece is also known as the evaporator, and in order to fix the problem that we had now, you basically just need to swap out the broken vacuum chamber assembly, because it has all of these coils that are leaking all over the place, and replace it with a brand new one. Let me show you the connections here at the bottom so that you'll know where they go. It's actually super simple. All right, let's flip this around so you can see the connections. We're at the very bottom of the vacuum chamber assembly. This is where the drain hose goes. And I'm going to flip this over to show you a little bit better, but you basically have 2 connections at the very bottom. One is a very tiny capillary tube, and the other is a 3/8 inch copper tube. One tube going in, the other tube coming out. The capillary tube goes into the machine, and that's going to be connected directly after your filter dryer. As far as this larger tube, that is exiting the evaporator system, and that's going to be connected directly to your compressor. And so you might have to add a joint, or you might have to add a little bit extra copper tubing, but that's exactly where that's going to go. And once you connect those 2 pieces, your system is fixed and you are back in business. All right, let me put this away right quick. That's the part. It's super easy to install. A qualified refrigeration expert can have your old evaporator off and your new evaporator on and installed, and you'll be freeze drying in less than, I would say, 4 or 5 hours. It actually doesn't take very long to do that particular fix. So that's how you would officially fix your freeze dryer. But that's not what we're going to be doing in today's video. What we're going to be doing today is actually modifying our freeze dryer to see if we can get it to freeze faster and freeze dry more efficiently. And let me just be clear that I am not suggesting or recommending that you do any of the things that I'm about to show you in this video. We're just having fun with the freeze dryer that currently doesn't work. After episode 1, Harvest-Right agreed to send me a replacement Pro model freeze dryer, which we've been using for quite some time, and that particular model hasn't had any issues as of right now, and it's been about 5 months. So let's have a little bit of fun. Let me show you the capillary system that was part of the drum, and I think that this is going to be important for you to know because it helps you better understand how your system works. Let's get in a little closer.
All right, this is what they call a capillary tube or a cap tube, and this is a very simple, very inexpensive metering device that controls refrigerant. You basically have liquid refrigerant that comes into the cap tube, and as it gets compressed through that very tiny capillary tube, it exits the tube with a change in flow and a change in pressure. And really the size diameter of the tube as well as the length of the tube controls what the flow is and what the pressure is when it exits. And this is the main reason that your drum for your freeze dryer can get so cold. We're talking negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you know how to engineer a capillary tube and you know how long it needs to be, you can make it to where when the refrigerant leaves that tube, you are pushing that refrigerant to the absolute limit, getting it down to those negative 40, negative 45 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, whereas under normal circumstances you would never need to.
All right, so that's basically a capillary tube in a highly oversimplified way. The inside diameter with the length of the tube determines the pressure and the temperature of the refrigerant coming out. But one thing I did notice with this particular system is that when you have a load, so when you have food in the shelves, the heater kicks on, the vacuum kicks on, the freeze dryer tends to act differently. And so I wondered whether a capillary tube was the best design for this particular system. We need to take a minute and recognize this video's MVP because I got to be honest, without his help, I could not have made this video. He took me through a crash course in heating, air conditioning, and refrigeration. He is not only our #1 patron, but he has been with us from the very beginning, so he's our longest standing patron. His name is Larry Kapigian, and he is the owner of Superior Air out in Visalia, California. Over the last 8 months, I've put in more than 500 phone calls, asked him thousands of questions, and Larry was gracious to answer each and every one of them. So thank you, Larry. I'm going to put a link to Larry's business, Superior Air. It's superior-air.com. You can find a link in the description box below. Be sure to check them out, especially if you're in the Visalia or the Central Valley area. All right, so let's take a look at what Larry sent us so that we can modify our machine in the hopes to make it freeze faster and freeze dry more efficiently. Let's take a look.
Let's look at what we're adding to the system. And once again, thank you, Superior Air out in Visalia, California. Larry Kapigian, we could not have done this without you. All right, let's take a look at what we got. The first component that we're going to be adding to this particular machine is something called a thermal expansion valve. That's what this is right here. Now, there's a cartridge that goes into that. I didn't show it on camera, but there is one. And that bit at the top, that's called a power head or an element. This should meter our refrigerant a little more efficiently and take into consideration the different loads that happen during the freezing and the freeze drying cycle. This bit right here is called a suction accumulator. And the purpose of a suction accumulator is to catch any excess liquid refrigerant as it's leaving the evaporator so that we don't damage the compressor. So we only want vapor going to the compressor. This guy right here is basically there to protect the compressor. Another piece that we're going to add that is exclusively there to help protect the compressor is a CPR or a crankcase pressure regulator. So being that we're using a thermal expansion valve, and we're more than likely going to be running at full throttle, I think that the pressure on the evaporator side is going to be relatively high. And that could cause our compressor to not start properly or perhaps even seize up. We definitely don't want that. So no matter what the pressure is coming into the line, at any given moment, the pressure coming out of the line is not going to exceed about 15 psi. So this component is basically being put in place, much like the suction accumulator, for compressor protection. Okay, since this is filled with nitrogen and is basically junk, we're just going to toss it. And just a quick recap as to the modifications that we're making. We're in essence replacing the capillary tube with a thermal expansion valve. That's basically it. The rest of the stuff is just to protect the compressor. I bought a bunch of copper tubing and began the process of wrapping the drum. We did wrap about 78 feet of copper tubing around the drum, which gave me 2 additional coils. And my thought process here was if we had more coils, it'll get colder faster. This was a little tricky, I do have to admit, because we had to make sure that all of that copper tubing came into direct contact with that stainless drum so that it could freeze more efficiently. The next step is to protect the copper tubing from moisture, so we're going to go 100% overkill on this one, but I guarantee you will never have at least that issue again. So the first thing I'm going to do is seal the space between the copper tubing and the drum with some extremely low temp silicone. This goes down to negative 60 F, which I think is going to be perfect. Next, we're going to spray the entire drum with some anti-corrosion spray paint. So this is spray paint that you would put on your appliances. We want to coat all the copper tubing, top and bottom, and I ended up doing that 3 times over the course of a couple of days. Finally, remember, we're going for overkill on this, and we're going to be adding some insulation tape. This is 1/8 inch tape, 2 inches wide, and we're covering each one of those copper tubing. I ended up wrapping it twice, so the total thickness was roughly about a 1/4 inch, maybe a little bit more, because each one of the pieces of tape did overlap slightly. I do want to press that very tightly against the copper tubing, and so now we are completely sealed up, ready to go. There is absolutely no way any moisture is going to be trapped inside this drum. Our drum is officially insulated, although I would like it a little bit thicker, so we're going to add one more layer of insulation just to seal the deal. We're using a sheet of Thermoflex insulation, and we're strapping it all together with these straps that I bought on Amazon. No big deal. I am going to leave that one little section open. We are going to fill it with Thermoflex here in a second, but we do have to braze everything together, and I don't want to burn up the insulation too bad. And so we're going to add that section right there, right at the very end.
I did choose to cut out the section with all the technical details. I'm talking, it is supremely technical and ultra boring. Now, if you absolutely want to see that, I may put a video suggestion maybe right here at the very end of this video, and that's going to go into adding refrigerant, vacuum test, pressure test, the manifold, subcooling, superheat, all that really great stuff. With that being said, let's just throw these components into the machine and see if it works. We'll get right back to you.
Let's get the rest of the components installed. We now have our suction accumulator put in place. This is the little cartridge that goes inside of the thermal expansion valve. And speaking of which, let's attach the expansion valve. It's time to fire this unit up and see if it even works. So what we need to do is just go ahead and connect everything the way that we had it. I'm not going to fully assemble the machine because I still need to access, the refrigeration system, but we are going to connect the computer and the screen. We are going to hook up the sensors as well as the hoses inside the drum, and this clicks on very easy. You just want to be careful with it. I'm going to adjust that to where it's more horizontal rather than vertical with a little bit of spacing underneath it, and that looks perfect. And finally, let's connect the outlet and the vacuum pump, and I did take photos of this before I disassembled it so I would know, where to plug everything in. All of our hoses are hooked up. Our system is installed. That's the CPR, the crankcase pressure regulator, ready to go. This is our thermal expansion valve, and we've got our sensing bulb already insulated with a little cork tape on the exit line of our evaporator popping into the suction accumulator. Our sight glass is installed. We also have a new filter dryer right there in the back, which you should always add a new filter dryer every time you open up your system. I've added a little refrigerant to the system, so it's not fully charged. And what I want to do is I want to get into the functional testing just to see how it operates. I just want to see how it freezes, because if it does a good job on this first test, we're going to go ahead and fill it up the way that we need to, and then go ahead and run our full test. So we've turned the unit on, and what I'm looking for is the way the ice rings form. And notice how they're all forming kind of at the exact same time, as opposed to very slowly from the back to the front. I'm loving what I'm seeing. So far, so good. This thing got icy cold super quick, and it looks like we're in business. And we haven't even added the right amount of refrigerant. So I'm not going to bore you with the details of what that looks like. Be sure to check out the next installment in this series if you want to get into the geeky stuff. Okay, our machine is freezing the way that it should. We have the proper amount of refrigerant inside the system, and everything looks great. We need to now put it back together. Reattach the door, secure the drum, slide in the tray, add the door seal, and then of course, add the modular controller, because I want to see how this unit acts during a freezing and drying cycle. So this is just going to be standard, as we're going to customize the controls and bring the temperature up to, let's say, -10. I just want to see how long it takes to get to -10F. We are going to bring the extra freeze time down to 0. Dry temp's going to stay the same, and extra dry time is going to stay the same. So I just want to see how it freezes, how it dries, and then, of course, how the water sublimates once we're finished. The initial step is to cool the vacuum chamber down. Once that initial step is over, we need to go ahead and load the trays, and what I'm going to be doing is just putting 5 trays into the system. Each has 1 cup of water, so we have 5 cups of water inside of our freeze dryer. And notice inside the walls between the shelves and the drum, you've got a good frosty ice ring already starting to form. Let's go ahead and close the drain valve and click start. It's now in the freezing mode. We're going to run through this kind of quick. The vacuum freezing mode has now kicked on. We're 4 hours into it. We hit our target of -10, so no problem there. And if you look inside the tray, everything is frozen. The vacuum is on, and it's beginning to do its thing. The next cycle is drying, which is where we're at now. 5 hours into the process, notice my temperature's at -16, -17. And I did have to manually advance the system because I was noticing a weird issue with my vacuum. Notice it's only reading 1,042 millitors, and it's kind of hovering around there. I am encouraged by the temperature because this is something that normally took a long time. So being at -16 shelf temperature in such a short time is pretty sweet. Now, I am concerned about the millitors. We should be down to about 500 by now. But granted, it is only 1 minute into the drying cycle. So let's check back in an hour and a half. And this is what it now looks like 90 minutes later. Notice that my millitors have not changed very much. So this is problematic. We should be pulling a much better vacuum, and this is letting me know that there is a vacuum issue somewhere in the machine. So if you're not subscribed, go ahead and click that subscribe button right now, because in the next How We Fixed Our Freeze Dryer video, I'm going to show you how to fix that vacuum issue. I'm going to talk about every potential leak point and how you can address it, because if you don't address it, you can have a problem with your freeze dryer either not running or running very inefficiently. And this is just one of those things that can potentially happen when you buy a Harvest Right freeze dryer. So I just want to be completely honest. It's important for you to know all of this stuff before you make a purchase. Now, we are 16 hours into the process. Notice the lowest my millitor got was 968. That number should be even lower right now. That should be around 250, 240. 21 hours and 45 minutes total dry time, 123 Fahrenheit on the temperature. Not a problem with that. All right, so let's look at the trays. It looks like our water has completely sublimated, so we're going to cut the process early. We're going to hit cancel, take the trays out. And you get to see what freeze-dried water looks like. It's actually pretty fascinating. This is one of those freeze-dried items that is going to be in high demand during the apocalypse. As you can see here, it doesn't take up a lot of space, so you could put it in a Mylar bag, and it rehydrates incredibly easy. Let's pull our shelving system out and take a look at our ice formation. How did the water sublimate against the drum? This was an issue that we had coming into this particular project. And I am loving what I'm looking at right here. We've got ice formation from the back all the way to the front. If you remember, before, the ice would only accumulate at about 50 to 75% of the drum. So it would stop right about here, maybe a little bit further. And that is not how your freeze dryer should work. You should really be able to maximize the entire space inside your drum. Otherwise, you're going to have ice accumulation that's thicker on one side, which can lead to major problems. You're in essence reducing the capacity of your freeze dryer by 50% or 75%, depending on where that ice ring stops. And this will cause your freeze dryer to be very inefficient, extended dry times, and in a worst case scenario, it could ruin your pump by allowing water vapor to no longer sublimate on the walls and get sucked into the vacuum pump, which is super problematic. Being that our freeze dryer is now working the way that it should, we've got a really great surface area from back to front of frozen drum, which gives the vapor that's being sublimated plenty of space to stick to the drum. Now, that's going to keep our ice ring relatively thin, and it's going to maximize the efficiency of our freeze dryer. After it's all said and done, I'm loving what I'm seeing, and this is a success in my book. So let's go ahead and wrap this video up with just a few thoughts.
All right, folks, there you have it. Our freeze dryer is finally operational. At the end of the day, our freeze dryer does cool actually faster. Instead of having a gradual cooling cycle from the back to the front, it kind of all cools at the exact same time because we're flooding the evaporator with liquid refrigerant that is -35, -40 degrees, which is absolutely perfect. I did find that it also freeze dried more efficiently because our drum stayed colder through the load, and we were able to sublimate ice from the back all the way to the front. So now the million-dollar question, was it worth it? Well, if I had to do it all over again, knowing what I know now, I would say with 100% certainty, absolutely not. We probably put almost $800 to $1,000 worth of parts into our freeze dryer, and although we did gain efficiency during the drying and the cooling sped up dramatically, to me, it really wasn't worth the cost. The way the refrigeration system is designed currently, now remember, I'm not talking about the coils or the drum or the insulation or anything like that, just the system of cooling. It actually does what it's supposed to do. It's slightly less efficient when it comes to drying. It takes a lot longer to get to temperature, but the efficiency and the time that we did gain, I did not feel was worth the money that we put into it. So if I had to do it all over again, I would just repair it the way they had it from the factory, because when everything is working properly, it actually does what it's supposed to do. All right, folks, thanks for watching this video. You guys are amazing. Don't forget to drop your thoughts or your questions in the comment section below. And if you enjoyed this video, got something out of it in any way, way, be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you're new to this channel and you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and that notification bell. We've got all kinds of different videos that bring a fresh approach to freeze drying. And don't forget, if you're into the real technical geeky stuff of what we had to do to get the freeze dryer fully operational, be sure to stick around, which should be uploaded right about now, actually. Once again, folks, thanks a lot for being here. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.